We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
So how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.
Hope it didn't take that long again. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. You heard it right. That's right. You are back on the 100 Sanford podcast. You are with Lovelace. You are with Graham Coffey. We are here. We are live in the building, ready to do this show. Cannot wait as we break down what happened last week. We break down what's about to happen as we hit this midway point. Graham, what's going on, pal? Well, I think Graham might be frozen.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
So how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.
Hope it didn't take that long again. Go Dogs.
That's right. Go Dogs. Welcome back to the 100 Sanford podcast. It is Lovelace here with Coffee tonight. No Big G. He's actually, I'm not going to spread my man's business, but he's on vacation. You know what I mean? He's doing what he does.
Look,
Coffee,
man,
what's going on?
He's off drinking Chiantis and, off doing things on a whole other continent right now.
Living
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm in North Carolina. Road game show for me. Was in Athens last weekend for the beatdown of the Wildcats. So that was fun. Got to meet a lot of listeners, a lot of Dawg Central subscribers as well, which was super cool. And just man, lots of good people in Dawg Nation for real. Just a lot of kind folks that are supportive of what we're doing, and they give us their time and in some cases their money to support the content that we're making, and that's pretty awesome. And also want to give a shout out to White with Bulldogs battling breast cancer. They're doing their pledge drive right now, and still going on. But got to go by that tailgate and meet some of those fine folks, and also got to meet our guy British Bulldog dude. Chris was in town from across the pond, which was pretty cool.
Chris must be making good money off those T-shirts, man, because Chris is always, lately he's been in Athens a lot.
It's only his second time. But,
no, I'm giving him a shout out. I got one of his shirts myself, man.
Yeah, I said on Twitter on Sunday, like, if Georgia keeps playing like that when he shows up, then the athletic department needs to subsidize some like seven intercontinental round trips a year for our guy Chris.
NIL deal, man. British Airways.
That's right.
Yeah, man. But it's good. We're midway through the season. The Dogs are here doing their thing. Like you just mentioned, another big time victory over the Wildcats. But before we even go any further, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow. Make sure you do everything that we do here on the YouTube channel for the 100 Sanford podcast, along with IG, TikTok, and the X. Follow and repost. We can only appreciate it. We definitely appreciate everything you do. Also, become a member of Dawg Nation, the collaboration for the nation. Like Graham said, he just met a lot of great people while he was in Athens.
Dawg
There's
Central.
a lot of Dawg Central. My bad. There's a lot of good content, a lot of good people. It's a good way to meet people. You know what I mean? That we're all over the country. Heck, Graham, you're out there in Colorado. Usually, I'm up in Virginia. Big G is down in Georgia. But people are everywhere. But Dawg Nation goes everywhere. So make sure you join Dawg Central and get the content that only we can all give you. Yeah, Kentucky, man. We should talk
Yeah,
about it. We got to talk about it. It was a beatdown, obviously, something that I did not expect. And you weren't on the show last week.
I
And
know.
we had DP, we had David Pollock on, and he was like myself. He was like, look, man, until they prove it,
Right.
they got a tough competitor coming in. Um, he wanted to see what they could do. I wanted to see what they could do. What are your thoughts? You were there in the house at Sanford Stadium.
Well, I mean, my thoughts going in are the same as yours. I mean, against South Carolina, I predicted them to win big. Against Auburn, I didn't predict them to like blow them out of the water, but I thought that they would win comfortably. And so when I did my big long, advanced stat scheme preview for Dog Central, I said 28-16, and I was just like, I think there is a universe where Georgia blows Kentucky out in this game, but like you said, until I see them do it, like then I can't keep predicting it, right? Like I can't, Georgia hadn't covered a spread all year going into Saturday, so I don't bet on Georgia usually. It's kind of bad juju sometimes, but still, like point being, they had underperformed versus what a lot of people thought they would do against some of these opponents, and against the G5 teams, it doesn't really matter, but once is once, but twice is almost a habit, right? So I thought that this game, everybody's talked about not having fast starts. They'd only scored 17 points in the first quarter all year going into Saturday against anybody, like in all first quarters combined. So I thought this was the game where it was most important for them to get a fast start, because with Kentucky's run game, like, if Kentucky can play the style that they want, then this could have been an interesting football game, I think, right? Like, they go on these long drives and they're ground and pound and all of that, and all of a sudden you look up and it's, 4 minutes to go in the second quarter and you've only had the ball 3 possessions maybe. So them getting off to the fast start that they did was perfect timing, in my opinion. It kind of game scripted Kentucky out of what they wanted to do on offense. Like, once they got down 14, and especially when they were down 21, they had to play catch up through the air. Weren't built to do it. Devin Leary is not that guy. I thought that they answered the bell, like, right on time. They were there to have that first quarter performance, and I think the staff deserves a ton of credit for how they adjusted. Like, Auburn was a data point, right? And that can either become a habit or it can become something you learn from. And I think they learned a lot from what they saw from their personnel in that game. And then they drew up a game plan to help that personnel.
Yeah, I think on both sides of the ball, they did that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like you said, they wanted to start fast. When you start looking at what they've done and what they did that day, I mean, Beck, 28 of 35, 389 in the air. Bowers, he got the ball. They spread the ball out a lot. Jack Saint. They played explosive defense. They were all over the field, right? They were doing everything that they had to do. But when we were talking to David Pollock last week, he brought up what I brought up on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, we wanted to start fast, but on the defensive side of the ball, it was setting the edge. That was the most important part of this game. I think that a lot of people didn't realize on the defensive side. In the trenches, it was still,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
All right.
Yeah, right. It was okay, right? We still there's a lot to be desired, but setting the edge causes a lot for this defense to be what it needs to be going the rest of the way out, right? You cannot give up 10-yard, 15, 20-yard explosive plays and expect to win too many football games. I mean, their offense, obviously, it showed out. 51 points. They're supposed to score like that. They have that type of personnel to do so. But defensively, they have to set the edge, and they did that against Kentucky, which I think was a big key. When you look at the time of possession, you mentioned it already to start off the show. I mean, you said if Kentucky got moving and Kentucky started doing what they were able to do, they neutralized your offense by keeping you off the field. Georgia had the ball for 37 minutes, dude. That's a lot of time against a Kentucky team that loves to run the football. That's what goes to show you how dominant they really were against Kentucky on all facets, whether it was throwing the football running the football, timely passes. Um, there's I don't know how much I can say about that offense. It was just explosive. It was fun to see.
Well, I mean, I think a couple things that stood out for me on the offensive side of the ball. Number one was like coming off the Auburn game. Like, I don't think Bobo's done a bad job at any point this year,
Not at all.
but I think the Auburn game plan for me was a little on the side of like, we're going to come out and impose our will. And I think, going into that game, Auburn, we talked about it on the show. Like, they had only given up, I think, 2.5 yards an attempt on runs between the tackles against Texas A&M. And so that was the way to attack them, in my opinion, in that game was maybe to not start up the middle, like maybe spread them out and then try to hit the middle later. And Georgia kind of, just never got into a rhythm with the run game, really, at any point in that football game. They got into a little bit of a rhythm off that left side on the long 98-yard touchdown drive, but it was very sporadic, right? And, like, my opinion was that we learned Georgia's not a run-first team. They can run the football, but, like, they need the threat of pass to help them run the ball right now and to help this offensive line out who has been without Amarius Mims, has been struggling. So you saw that, right? Carson Beck, I think in the first 3 drives was 11 of 11 for like 183 yards and 2 touchdowns, I believe.
Yeah.
I wanted to see more gap scheme. Like Georgia under Monken the last 2 years was almost 50-50 zone scheme to gap scheme in their run plays. Against Auburn, I think they ran like 6 gap and 18 zone. I'd have to double check those numbers, but that's what I recall. And I think this offensive line hadn't really been bullying people and knocking them off the ball. So let's use the athleticism of these guys and let's try to out leverage some people. Against Kentucky, came out running a lot of gap scheme, exactly half and half gap to zone. I wanted to see more runs out of spread personnel because I feel like Georgia's done a good job getting outside the tackles in the run game when they've spread out and had 3 and 4 wide receivers and just spread their personnel. You saw that. And then the big question, like, Carson has grown every week, right? And I think it's always been important for all of us to remember that he is a first-time starter. And when he showed up at Georgia, all he wanted to do was throw deep shots, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what he's always done. And that's what he's always been good at. In this game, you finally saw them kind of let the reins off of him a little bit. And early on, you saw the rah-rah touchdown for the second touchdown, but like before that, just, hey, rah-rah's in one-on-one off to the side on the far side of the formation, and he's got enough cushion to just turn around and take 8 easy yards. You saw Rosemy do that as well on the second drive. Like, that's good, efficient, effective offense. And Georgia stayed on schedule on first down the whole time. Like, first drive of the game, you get swing pass to Edwards. You get kind of a motion screen type action to love it. Like, they got those Kentucky linebackers and safeties chasing sideline to sideline early. And 11 of Carson Beck's pass attempts in this game, which I believe he had 35 pass attempts.
35 attempts.
11 of those attempts were outside the numbers. Not outside the hashes, outside the numbers. Like, very much to the boundary. That was by far the most of those kind of attempts we've seen all year from him. So, point being, like, everything that we saw that didn't really work against Auburn, they adjusted, like, immediately, It wasn't a slow, gradual thing. Like, they took that information and they said, this is what we're good at. And then they went and did what they were good at. And they also, at the same time, made Kentucky do what they weren't comfortable doing. So I thought it was a beautiful game plan and thought it really showed, like, the ceiling of this offense in a new way.
It makes me wonder because you were talking about the amount of gap runs versus zone run against Auburn. It's making me think, Did they look at the second half of that Auburn game and adjust accordingly to the Kentucky game? Did they switch that up and make sure that game plan was going to operate that way? Because it's almost like they carried over from the Auburn game going straight into the Kentucky game. You know what I mean? Like it was seamless. It was almost like these guys were in rhythm. They started off fast. They started off very composed. They started off like they knew exactly what they had to do going into the game all the way throughout. And it's almost like they found their identity. You know, whether maybe it was the Auburn game testing their fortitude, testing who they were. But they found their identity against Kentucky during that game. And it's going to be interesting going the rest of the way out if they maintain throwing the football to set up the run. It's going to be interesting to see whether they adjust it or have to adjust any other way, if any other team's going to adjust them or make them adjust. I have no idea. But right now it seems like you just mentioned, it's the pass game setting up the run, and it's become more effective. And like you mentioned, I also love them going outside the numbers, man. It spreads the defense out, right? And when you got the hosses that can go get the ball, when you got a Raw Thomas who can make a dynamic catch at the goal line, when you got, Rosemary Jackson just doing what he's doing as a big physical receiver, and of course you got the unicorn, you got the all-world tight end Brock Bowers who can do whatever he wants to do outside the numbers as well. It's phenomenal, man. It's just fun to see. It's really fun to see this team really start to come into its own, because they are different than 21. They're different than 22. It's its own type of unit. And week to week, I think we're just going to see something else added to the arsenal of this team.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this team, like, Stetson Bennett was great. The 2022 offense was great. But I do think this offense has a higher ceiling, and it has the ability to stress defenses vertically in a way that last year's offense, maybe couldn't do every single week. And I love how Bobo is – what he's basically doing is, like, he's taking good wide receivers and he's having those guys run 40 to 50 yards downfield to occupy safeties. Because teams are playing like quarters coverage and cover three, and they're trying to play these shells and keep Georgia from hitting those explosives. And he's basically running guys 50 yards deep to occupy those safeties, and he's having Beck throw 20 to 30 yard bombs underneath that, and then those guys have plenty of room to run. So it's well thought out, it's well designed, and it feels like that they finally kind of hit that role that we've been waiting to see. And I'm very fascinated and excited to see how that kind of continues, because if this keeps up, like, you got to start talking about Carson Beck and the Heisman Trophy conversation. You do.
Woo.
You do.
No, I mean, I'm there. I'm there. The only thing that you hope, well, I mean, it's rich people problems, right?
Right.
If he's up there for the Heisman, that means Bowers is up there for the Heisman. So
correct.
Usually what ends up happening, they split votes. Votes get taken away. They're given to one player, given to the other player, and then some other player reaches up there and wins the Heisman. So you kind of hope that wouldn't happen. But if that's the case, then give Brock the Lifetime Achievement Award. Let him ride it off into the sunset with the Heisman, and then let Beck come back and do it again in 24.
I mean, Carson Beck is, he's the fourth leading passer in the country right now. And I mean, he hadn't played more than, I think he's played 2 fourth quarters all year in 6 games. And Georgia hasn't really even been throwing the ball around much in the second half of a lot of these games. Like, he's basically going for 3 bills every time he goes out and plays 4 quarters.
And put that in perspective, because there's other quarterbacks that are playing all the way through and having to play 4 quarters just to keep their teams in it, or padding stats,
Right.
We don't do it.
Yeah, and if they had wanted to get him like 450, 500 in this game, they easily could have.
Yeah.
Georgia, the thing you always have to remember when you talk about statistics and offensive statistics in particular with Georgia is like this is a long play, right? Like they're not going to burn a bunch of good stuff on the tape when they're up 25 points. They're gonna save those plays for when they need them down the road.
Yeah. And I'm all for it. And I hope that Dawg Nation can understand it. I know that you want to see the explosive numbers. You want to see the guys go for 400, Brock get 205 touchdowns. It's not going to happen at Georgia. We get up to a certain point and get a certain lead. Kirby shutting down the offense, and I kind of like it, quite honestly. It keeps you healthy. That's the first thing. Second, it gives some of these younger guys that you may need a little bit later in the season some reps. They get reps. They get live bullets thrown at them. You know what I mean? And it's against first team defenses, right? Because other team doesn't take out their starters. They leave their starters in. So you're getting live reps against a first team defense, no matter what it is, and allows your team to gain some more continuity, quite honestly.
Well, and in this portal era, like kids want to play, and it's a lot of work to be a football player. It's a full-time job, and it's basically year-round. You get very little off time, and you do all that work you only get guaranteed 12 games a year. And so those kids need to play. Like they need the reward of getting to come out there on that field in front of their friends and family and, wearing that jersey and getting to play. And you learn more about your team that way. Like, we were talking about the defensive line earlier and some of the, I think, issues might be too strong of a word, but there's things that group, I think, needs to do better for Georgia to get where they want to go, right? And, into the game, you got a D-tackle duo out there of Kristen Miller and Jordan Hall, and they are blowing shit up. I mean, they are. Like, they're at the snap taking Kentucky's first-string offensive line, who I know have been in the game a long time and might be kind of tired, but look at the number of plays they ran in that game. Like they probably weren't pretty that fresh, tired. Bro.
That's
right. Exactly.
22 minutes on the field, and they're used to being on the field 32 minutes. So
they're used to wearing people down and leaning on them. They get better as the game goes along, and you got two underclassmen defensive linemen out there, one a true sophomore, one a true freshman, and they are walking guys back into the backfield and then slipping into the run lane and tackling backs. Like, that's tantalizing. It's a long season. Guys, I think people forget, and I always stress this to like my friends who gamble on football in particular. Just because something happened to a team in week 2 or week 3 or week 1, like, these are static, living, breathing things, like these are organisms that are growing. They're like children or whatever they're like a plant, however you want to phrase it. Like, they grow, they change, they look different in November than they did in September. And when you're a team like Georgia that recruits the way they do and has so much raw talent on the roster, there are going to be guys who emerge. And I think you will see some different rotations and different looks on the defense as this year goes along.
Well, it's funny that you said that. You talked about talent. You talked about what Georgia looks like. Mm-hmm. Our boy Mark Stoops had something to say. I promise you, in Georgia, they bought some pretty good players.
Right.
You're allowed to see these. You're allowed to these days, and we could use some help. That's what they look like when you have 85 of them. I encourage anybody that's disgruntled to pony up some more. What were your thoughts on Mark Stoops and what he said?
Well,
I got my own, but what are yours?
I mean, first and foremost, I would say, like, I don't take that as a huge shot at Georgia. He's fundraising is what he's doing. And he's frustrated. He's got a caller that is calling him out, and he's at Kentucky where he has done a fantastic job. And, the caller brought up that he's only got 2 wins in his tenure against teams that finished with a winning record in SEC play. which is true. But, I mean, look at what Kentucky was for decades prior to him getting there. Like, there had been some years of success. 2007 stands out as one of those when they had Rich Brooks and Andre Woodson was the quarterback. They knocked off number 1 LSU. They were ranked highly for a time. But on the whole, like, they're not in a fertile recruiting ground. There's, it's a basketball school. And Stoops has done a lot to get the fan base interested. And in some ways, he's a victim of his own success, right? Like that people are calling in and complaining to the football coaches show in the Commonwealth of Kentucky is not something that happened before he got there, at least not often. So give him credit because he's a good football coach. And I think Kirby has respect for him, and everybody does. And I have respect for him. At the same time, like, did Devin Leary and Ray Davis transfer to Kentucky for free? Like you went to the portal to get your arguably your two most important offensive players, and those guys, at least one of those guys, particularly Leary, Davis has had a good season, but Leary hasn't really lived up to what was expected of him. So it sounds to me like, maybe you need to spend your money a little bit better. Like maybe you need to be smarter about how you invest and be a little better with your portal evals because like you're playing the same game everybody else is. And there's a lot of programs out there right now that are really buying players. Like in the sense that this kid would not be going to that school if that school was not the highest bidder and was not, promising and throwing around silly amounts of dollars. And Georgia is one of those that, like, if this was still pre-NIL era, this 2024 recruiting class would have 10 5-stars in it. I shit you not. Like, this recruiting class would blow any historical recruiting class out of the water if Georgia wasn't dealing with NIL right now.
Bro,
Williams-Nwaneri would be a Bulldog. KJ Bolden would be a Bulldog. Like, you can go down the list, and it would be a ridiculous collection of a talent that, like, might in 2 to 3 years rival the 2001, 2002 Miami Hurricanes kind of teams with, 8 first-rounders and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it would have been absurd. So that's my kind of critique of his comments is that Georgia is coming off back-to-back national titles. Like, it's not hard for them to recruit right now, and they are losing kids because of the new situation under NIL. On the whole, it has not been a plus for Georgia's recruiting. It has been a negative.
It's almost like you were in my room, over my shoulder, as I was taking down my notes, thinking about all of these things of what Mark Stoops said. I mean, it's like we're brothers from another mother.
Well, we are. We
are. But check this out. Just like you said, you got Leary on your team. You got Davis on your team. They didn't come there for free. No. We know they didn't come there for free. Why would a kid jump ship from an SEC school and go to another SEC school unless he was going there maybe for some better opportunities? That's what we say with quotes, air quotes, better opportunities. Not necessarily. He put in work last year. Davis put in work last year at Vandy.
Would you rather live in Nashville or Lexington? Cool
exactly. And if you can play, they find you. I remember my dad told me that years ago. He said, hey, it doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what school you go to. If you can play, they'll find you. They're looking for players all over the place.
Yeah.
You can't go in against a team like Georgia, a 5-star factory right now, high 4-star factory, and also think you're going to come out there with a victory. I mean, I think he was a little bit frustrated after that game. I mean, he thought his team was ready. He thought his team was prepared. He thought maybe this is the jump. Mm-hmm. Because everybody in the nation was saying Georgia's not that team this year. Oh, well, if they're not that team, we can knock them off. Then all of a sudden, your team goes in there and it implodes on itself, right? I mean, come on. Drop passes all over the place. Leary, 10 of 26. Guys not handling the situations, the atmosphere, all the false starts, the penalties against, what was it? What's the kid's name?
Jaeger Burton.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy, right? So I think he was just frustrated by the entire moment. That's one of the reasons why he kind of exploded with that comment. But
Mm.
last but not least, yeah, he's talking to the Kentucky fan base. He's talking to their boosters. He's talking to everybody around Kentucky to say, you know what, you guys give a lot of money for basketball. We haven't won a national title in a long time, by the way. It's time to give some money to football. It's time to put us on a level playing field with a Georgia or with an Alabama or Florida, whoever it may be. Because guess what, guys? Texas and Oklahoma are now coming into the conference next year, and we're going to get left behind even further if we don't pony up some money and put some money into the football program. So I think it was a statement, not against Georgia, like you mentioned. This was more a statement to his boosters and to the fan base to say, if we want to be competitive, if we want to go from an 8-win, 9-win team to a 10, 11, 12 team win and have an opportunity just to play in a now a 12-team playoff, we need the players. We need the horses to be able to do so. So let's bring some of that money back home.
And I can get on board with that. I really can. What I would say though is like, I think Stoops is alternately, depending on the time of year and the convenience, frustrated by Kentucky fans and Kentucky as a university identifying as a basketball school, and then also frustrated with expectations. If you're going to take the checks as an $8 million plus a year coach, one of the 10 highest paid coaches in the sport,
Yeah.
and you're going to take the checks from donors for the NIL deals of some of these guys that have come over in the portal or whoever else. You also have to deal with the expectations that come with that. And Kentucky is they're stuck in between worlds, between being that historical doormat and being an ascendant program that has done some really good things in the last 4 to 5 years in particular, won 10 games, won New Year's Day polls. Like, they've done a lot of really good stuff. They've become a good NFL developmental program where kids go and they stay for 4 to 5 years, and then they go and they get drafted, right?
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that it comes with expectations. And I am curious if, like, this is the offseason that we finally see Stoops seriously look around. Would he be interested in that Michigan State job? He's, he played at Iowa. He's an Ohio guy. He's from Youngstown originally. I could see him being very comfortable back in the Midwest. But, the frustration, the idea of Georgia bought better players than us. Well, bro, I mean, you've been here 11 years and you've never beaten Georgia. So the idea that this happened now because of NIL is very convenient. Like, it's a shoving of responsibility in some ways for the fact that, like, you're Kentucky and they're Georgia, and just you don't have the roster they do, and you probably never will. Whether it's NIL in effect, or the old rules, or free agency, or a draft system of all 5-star prospects, you're never going to have Georgia's roster because you don't live in that kind of fertile recruiting ground, and you don't have hundreds of years of history and tradition and fan support that kids are interested in being a part of. So I think that however you want to, like, slice the pie, so to speak, that the filling is still going to be the same.
Yeah. And he's got to realize, what his program is and what his program will always be. Everybody has aspirations when they start off the season of winning a national championship, an SEC championship, whatever it may be. But you got to be honest with yourself as well. He's at Kentucky. You can't tell me that he doesn't understand what his program is and the level that his program can get to. He has to really look at himself as maybe in Iowa with Kirk Ferentz, who he says, you know what? I'm fine where I'm at. My family is fine. I love it here. I love the fan base. The fan base is happy with 10 wins, 9 wins, whatever it may be, maybe an upset here or there, and we have a good time. It's a good party. That's what he has to realize. But it's also a different era.
Mm-hmm.
It is an NIL era. So they have the opportunity to get to 11 wins. But like you mentioned, they're never going to have the fertile recruiting ground. That's not going to happen. So even if it was all level playing field, Georgia, like you just mentioned, Georgia's still going to be Georgia.
Right.
Florida has so many players inside the state of Florida, Florida State, Miami. They're always going to be those schools. But a school like Kentucky is going to take a hit. Quite honestly, Alabama's going to take a hit. Once Texas and Oklahoma enter the SEC, they're going to take a major hit, especially if Saban ends up leaving anytime soon. They're going to
Yeah.
take a major hit because you can't go into Louisiana, Texas, Georgia, and continue to pull out some of the talent you've always pulled out because now a kid can go to any of these schools, and NIL has leveled the playing field for a lot of teams to actually catch up. So we're going to see a big difference of things that happen over the next few years, anytime sooner, quite honestly. But it's going to be much, much different. But Mark, calm down. I mean, just coach your team, man. I mean, you got Mizzou this weekend. You can bounce back. That'll be a pretty good game, a test
That'll
of
be a
wills.
great game, yeah.
Great game, man. I was watching that game on my way home from Pittsburgh this past weekend, and Mizzou can sling that thing, man. They're slinging the ball all over the place. They can't play no defense,
No.
but they were slinging that. They were slinging that rock, man.
But, I would say I don't know that Kentucky's really going to stress their pass defense anyway, so maybe.
Yeah.
I had
Like I said,
Mizzou
test the
plus
will.
5.5, so when Brady Cook threw the pick six in a game that they had led by as many as 15 and never trailed by more than, I think, 3 or 4 points, it was a gutting bad beat. But
Man, I texted you guys. I was watching. I was like, yo, they are taking LSU out and just spanking arse. And then all
They
of a sudden,
were.
I look back up and I'm like, how did LSU come back? But it was Jaden Daniels, man. I mean, he was a one-man show in that game. He was phenomenal in that game.
Yeah, he definitely belongs in the Heisman conversation. I don't know if his team will win enough games at the end for him to get New York, but if we're talking best players in college football, he's high on the list.
Yeah, man. Little soft everywhere else except for Jaden Daniels. Well, let's get into this week, man. We got a new game coming up. That's right. We are talking about Vandy. The Dogs go on the road. Big time game. Another game for the Dogs to kind of showcase who they are and who they are going to be the rest of the season. 6-0. Vandy 2-5. All time 60-20 against Vanderbilt. Last meeting, we all remember that 55-0. I put down some of my keys to the game. Control the trenches. They got to continue to build it, grow in those trenches, Graham. I mean, whether it's offensive line, defensive line, they got to continue to show dominance. I think that they took a step forward last week in terms of, like you just mentioned, the gap runs and things of that nature. Hat on a hat and just blowing these guys off the ball, allowing the run game to kind of get going. They've been protecting Beck, which has been phenomenal, quite honestly. The pass protection has been outstanding, allowing him to have a clean pocket. I want to continue to see explosive plays this week, man. It's funny. We had a wide receiver decommit this week, Nycar.
Right. Okay.
And
we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, we could talk about it slightly. I don't want to bash the kid because I have no problems with the kid.
No, he's a good player. He's a good kid. He's
right,
exactly
exactly.
To us at Dog Central. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. But for anybody to believe that this is just a tight end offense, you're not watching Georgia football.
Well, in fairness, he was at the Miami game watching that debacle go down. So
I'm sure he was. I mean, that was a debacle. But think about it. You got the number one tight end, and I don't even say just number one tight end, the greatest college tight end in history. That's on Georgia. It's not even debatable. He's blown away all the numbers. Not debatable.
He's a once in 40-year type player, is what he is. I mean,
two-time national. Look, he's Mike Ditka in 2023. I mean, that's
that's right. It's something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But two-time national champion. The guy can play wide receiver. He can play running back. He can do whatever he wants. He can play quarterback if he wants to. Who do you think is getting the ball? Brock Bowers. Besides that, exactly. Besides that, Beck is slinging that thing, and it's going to a lot of receivers. And just because you don't see one receiver getting 10 catches for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns like they do at Ohio State or like they were doing at Alabama does not mean that the ball's not getting passed around. I don't remember how many guys caught balls, but it was somewhere around, 14 different
14 guys caught balls. Here's the stat that really stood out to me, right, is Rosemy. He had 5 targets, 4 catches for 99 yards, and those 99 yards receiving came on just 13 routes run. Like, he only ran 13 routes in this game. But he got 99 yards. Like, you get open, you're going to eat. You know, that's over 7 yards receiving per every route that he ran in this football game.
The good question to that is, in those 13 routes that he ran, the times that he didn't get the ball, who else got it? It was probably Brock, or it was probably
Rah-Rah,
right?
yeah.
With big plays. I mean, everybody can't touch the ball at the same time. You wish they could, but it's impossible. Um, if you're open, you're going to get it, and it's going to be explosive plays. I mean, I don't know what kids want these days. I understand that everybody wants to be, OBJ. They want to be Jefferson, whatever it may be, man. But that's not how football is. I mean, you got to work yourself to that point, and there's no better place than playing at Georgia, where you're not only just going to, learn how to play the position, but you're going to be an NFL ready wide receiver, a capable blocker, a guy that's able to run precise routes that open up, other guys and their opportunities to eat.
Well, that's right. And I also think that, like, the other thing I would point out is that one of the reasons why Georgia's won 2 straight national championships is because they establish so many threats on offense that nobody can really get taken away. And Kentucky tried at times to take Brock Bowers away in that first half on Saturday night. And what happened is, like, oh, well, there's Rah-Rah Thomas in one-on-one on an RPO. So Beck's going to pull the ball out of the running back's stomach, and he's going to loft up a 50-50, and he's going to go make that catch for a highlight reel touchdown. And now he's on SportsCenter all over the place, right? Like, the eating of the wide receivers is in part a product of the threat that Brock Bowers is, and particularly the threat that he is across the middle of the field. That's why you saw all of that, those 11 pass attempts outside the boundaries, right? Like, it's not a coincidence that those opportunities came open the week after Bowers, did what he did against Auburn in the fourth quarter to help lead Georgia to that victory. So, like, the offense, it all works together, and I think a lot of these kids, and in high school, they are good enough to just run by everybody on every snap and, hey, float the ball up to me, I'll go make the play. That is realistic for some of these kids in high school, but when you get to college, especially when you get to college games against other elite teams, that ain't gonna work. Ohio State right now is basically just like, they can't run the football. They can't really complete passes to a lot of their other receivers, so they're just throwing the ball up to Marvin Harrison, 15 times a game, and that bails them out against Maryland, but it will come back to bite them at some other point if they're not able to establish some other threats.
Well, Graham, you just mentioned something that's pretty interesting, because you said in high school, yeah, you might be good enough, fast enough, quick enough to outrun everybody. You're the guy that's on your team that's so super special. Then you get to a collegiate level, and you know what? Ohio State's got a lot of receivers, but not everybody's Marvin Harrison Jr. You know what I mean? Not everybody's 6'3", 215 pounds, running a 4.35. So if you're not that guy, that size, that strength, that type of monster on the field, you can be neutralized pretty easy.
Right.
So you can be dang special, X Johnson or whoever your name is, or anybody else that thinks that you just want to go and get the ball 100 times. You better be dang special. And there are some guys that are. And guess what? When you're that special, you do get targeted 10 to 15 times, 20 times, whatever it may take. Just like Marvin Harrison gets targeted the ball, that's what Brock Bowers did. He gets targeted that many times because he's special. So
No, that's right. No, it's, I mean, it's correct. Like,
I wish I was in the room for some of these recruiting conversations that, that a coach will have with a kid to get it through his head. Like, hey, you want to go to X school, Y school, Z school for this particular reason. Just want you to realize you're not getting the ball like that there once you get there, because you're no more special than the guys they already have on that roster. But we have the ability here at Georgia to kind of make you even more special, more talented, develop your skill set so that you're ready for the next level, because everybody's going to eat. And when you get to the next level, you're going to continue to eat.
well, and I mean, Georgia keeps getting negative recruited on, hey, like the tight end is seeing all these targets, and like clearly that did have an impact on Nikar, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he told us that through his actions, so I don't feel like I'm saying anything that he didn't already say out loud, but
He tweeted it.
right. But as a recruit, like if I was interested in a school and the knock that an opposing staff came up with for a team was, hey, that player is too successful. Like, are you serious? I mean, like, oh, the knock is not, hey, like they lost in the national championship game in back-to-back years. The knock is not, oh, they can't make it to the playoffs. They can't win the division. They can't make a bowl, whatever. Go down the list of potential problems that could exist with a college program. The knock is that this one generational player is getting used, too well or featured too much. The counter to that is, guess what? That guy's going to be in the NFL in a few months, and you're going to come in, and they got to replace that production somehow. But if you think that, I mean, like there was a moment in the game on Saturday night, and I was sitting on the side that this happened, and I watched. It was like a third down situation, and it was the pass in the back corner of the end zone that Brock actually dropped.
Yeah.
But I mean, like they ran a stutter route with a tight end. Like they put a tight end one-on-one in space and said, go beat this corner to the back pylon, and he did, and the ball was honestly delivered perfectly. It was wild to see Brock, show that he's human and drop a pass. But my point being is, if you get there and you're as special as you think you are, then you're going to be running stutter routes to the back pylon on third down in space, and you're going to be in space in a one-on-one with a chance to toast your defender because you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of other good players that a defense is going to have to account for as well. It's not like recruits are getting phone calls from other staff saying, hey, the guy running this program is, so out of it late in the fourth quarter that he forgets to take a knee and ends up losing a game that he had a 99.9% win probability on. I mean, like, I'm just saying, like, it's just, I don't know. If I was a kid and I was kind of trying to weigh out pros and cons, I would be like, well, if that's the worst thing they got to say about him, then that seems pretty good. I don't know. I mean, like, and I like, when I was tweeting all that stuff, I shared his tweet and he responded and he said, like, I'm not trying to hate, but they could have shown this offense earlier. And there's maybe a level of truth to that, right?
Yep.
I would say, like, I think we've talked about it on this show. I've showed it on film reviews. There were wide receivers open downfield a lot in different situations, and sometimes they were busted coverages. And Beck is 6 games into this whole thing. He's still growing, like he's still figuring it all out. So my point here is just, it's hard to say that's what the offense is or isn't or will be 6 games into a new starter. And I don't know. I mean, like I said deny though, like every situation, what's best for every kid is different. And so if what's best for him is to go to Miami, then go to Miami. And I genuinely wish him success because I think he's a tremendous talent and he's a fantastic football player. But I also, I do think about James Williams sometimes, even prior to this whole situation.
Yeah.
I would see that kid on my TV. I was watching Miami, Texas A&M earlier this year, and he made like a great athletic play in that game. But you could tell at times like the coaching wasn't there for him, maybe in a way that it would have been at a Georgia or at some other elite programs with excellent defensive staffs. Like if that kid had taken his physical talent to Georgia and been coached as a safety by Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp, what he would have turned into, like, could have been, something on the levels of like the next, name one of the 5 to 10 best NFL safeties of all time because he had the physical tools for that. I just think the track record of development for Georgia right now is pretty good, and you see what George Pickens is doing in Pittsburgh on an offense that's kind of
Inept.
bad. No offense, Lamar. Yeah,
No,
like
it's inept. It's horrible.
yeah, it's horrible. And we all still, I think, agree that like he is one of the 5 most dynamic receiving talents in the NFL right now. And if he was on a better offense that allowed him to have more space and be targeted accurately more, like he could be maybe the best receiver in the NFL. He has the physical tools to be in that conversation. You're talking about a guy that played in 3 games his senior year, maybe 4. But point being, numbers in college do not always correlate to success in the NFL or to draft position. They don't. Like it's all the stuff that nobody wants to talk about or cares about that often ends up getting you drafted. It is it's like, are you blocking your ass off on the perimeter, or are you loafing on the perimeter, and that's why a run that your offensive line was able to fit up perfectly wasn't a touchdown.
Yep.
Those are the things that scouts are going to be looking at.
Yeah, man, and it's interesting to me. And again, I wish nothing but the best for Nia Carr. When we do this, I think a lot of fans don't really, or listeners don't really even understand the relationships we actually develop with recruits,
Yeah,
potential
and their
recruits,
families in a
families.
lot of cases.
Exactly. I mean, I can tell you right now, Tavani Mazzell that decommitted from Georgia, the running back that's out in Florida right now. I mean, love the kid. He's going to Kentucky. Pepe decommitted from Georgia. Love the kid going to Alabama. I support all these kids, man. Do what is best for you. All I want is you to have the ultimate success that you could possibly have. If that's the best situation for you, take it, because Georgia is not for everybody. And guess what? Other schools aren't for everybody. But please just make sure you're making an accurate choice, not off the whim, not off of NIL, not just because mom and dad want you here. You got to really, really evaluate your choices, especially like you just mentioned, when it comes down to some of these head coaches. Look at some of the decisions they make. They can tell you whatever they want in a recruiting visit. Look what's happening on Saturdays. Look what's happening between the white lines, and you'll get all the answers that you need. Look at the development. Look at the guys that are in the NFL. Look at what have they developed recently. Not
Right.
back when I was at X school. No, what have you developed recently? Because it doesn't take long for you to start to develop guys and put them in position to be successful players and ready for that next level. But
Well,
but
and yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything you're saying 100%. But like on top of that, you know, we always talk about this during quote unquote recruiting season, to borrow Dan Mullen's old terminology of his old name for summertime. We see these kids recruit in the summer all the time, and then you get a look of what's going on Saturday, and you can tell very easily. You can sit down and watch the games or watch the replays and the tape, and you can tell the difference between who is selling cotton candy on the recruiting trail and like who is selling things that actually have depth and weight and substance to them. And Georgia has proven that that their pitches have substance to them and they have results that they can point to in the NFL. And other programs are very much in the, this is what will happen. This is where we can go if you come here, instead of saying, there was a guy like you that came here 4 years ago. Now he is, in contention for Rookie of the Year in the NFL, and he got 2 national title rings on his way out the door. Those are 2 very different things, and I think kids are often reminded of that when the games actually start again. And it's like, oh, well, that team that had all of this momentum, or maybe they had one good season, like, now things are kind of back to earth. And, like, I'm very interested, not to pick on them, but I'm very interested to see what happens with Tennessee's recruiting through the close of this cycle, because, like, they had a really hot 2022. They were kind of the story of a lot of the 2022 college football season, and for good reason, right? They won some big football games, and now you're seeing that offense kind of struggle a little bit, and it's like, well, is it as sexy? Yeah, is it as sexy for a wide receiver to be in that system now? Like, what is that going to look like? So time will tell with all of it, but it is a fascinating discussion to have and to really look at in terms of, why do you want to go here versus there, especially if you take NIL out of it, if you take money out of these decisions, what's the motivator? And if there's a place that you think is best suited to get you to the NFL before NIL becomes part of a conversation, that's probably the place you need to be. Also, everybody's situation is different, man. And I'm never going to ever knock a kid or a family or anybody for cashing in on their chance to cash in, And I think Georgia's competitive in NIL, but they're not going to, throw out and chase some of the crazy dumb numbers that some of these, like, more up and coming emergent programs are going to throw around out there, because A, they don't have to, B, it's going to mess with the locker room dynamics that they have spent, the better part of a decade creating and building now, that culture that has yielded 2 national titles. And lastly, because at some point, like, you either want to be there or you don't. And Georgia's going to make sure these kids are well taken care of. All of their scholarship players have NIL deals. They make good NIL money, but, it's like you can't just say yes to everything, and, like, especially when it becomes these sort of bidding situations, it's just, well, what's first here? So I get both sides of it, I guess is my point.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting as all this plays out. I even go back and I look at, we're going to talk about Vandy real quick here, but I even go back and I look at the wide receiver at Mizzou. What's the kid's name?
Luther Burden.
Luther Burden. There you go. Name kind of escaped me for a second. When you're that type of talent, no matter where you go, you're going to be phenomenal, right? And he's there.
And he's phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, the state of Missouri made sure that he did not get out of town. They get him the rock, and he's going to be phenomenal. So if you're that type of guy, it doesn't really almost matter where you go. But for everybody else, I mean, just think twice. That's all I say. Think twice. Not just about the money. Go for the development. Go for the entire process. I don't know. If it's me, if it's my kid, at this point in time, I'm like, hey, go to Georgia, get developed, have a great time, enjoy the campus, enjoy the entire run. I mean, it's a phenomenal ride right now. But let's talk about Vandy, man. Let's talk about this upcoming game. Again, like I mentioned, 2-5, 55-0 last year. Vandy has not scored a touchdown on Georgia since 2018. That's how long it's been since they actually scored.
I was at that game last year. Yeah, it was.
What are your thoughts about going up to Nashville? As long as Kirby keeps these guys in the building. Doesn't allow them to get outside and anything else. But, what are your thoughts against Van?
I mean, it's like Georgia's going to win this game. We know that. I think this is going to be a game that, like, Georgia's not resting on the laurels of the Kentucky game. I talked to some sources on Tuesday, and they were like, dude, there was not a single mention of the Kentucky game in this building on Monday. Like, nobody, there's no, Attaway or, great job. Like, the focus is fully on the Vanderbilt game. And there's still a lot of things that they feel like they can be better at and that they need to be better at. So Georgia is going to go up there as this is a business trip, right? I look at Vandy, I think they miss Mike Wright a lot, the quarterback that was there last year, who is now the backup for Mississippi State. Like, Ken Seals is younger guy, up and coming. He's a nice player, but he's not that good, frankly. Like last week, 19 to 34. He did put 278 on Florida and 2 touchdowns. They have very good receivers, Will Shepard and I believe Jaden McGowan. I know his last name's McGowan. Both those guys are good. Like, those guys could both play for Georgia and play significant snaps. So I think it'll be a good test for the corners and for the secondary as a whole. Last week, Seals was pressured on 14 of his 37 dropbacks against Florida. So that's about 35%. Like, Florida's defensive line is good. It's way better than it was last year, but it's not great. Point being, I really want to see Georgia get pressure with 4 in this game. That's going to be something that I'm watching. The Vanderbilt defense is struggled this year. I mean, Vandy lost to UNLV. Last year they upset Florida at the end of the season. They beat Kentucky, I believe, in late October, early November. Like, they had a good year in 2022. This team's not quite as good as it was, I think, last season. And
shut that door, babe.
Georgia should be able to control the line of scrimmage in this game. And on offense, I think you'll see more of the same from the passing game, but I do think this is an opportunity for them to go and run the ball, have a good day on the ground. Florida went for 8.8 yards a carry on them on 26 attempts for 230. That's getting it done. And I mean, looking at sort of where they did their damage, like, Florida had 12 yards a carry off left guard. They had a 43-yard gain between center and left guard. They had 12.7 yards a carry at right guard. This is a get-right opportunity for Georgia's inside running game. And I did think that, they got right, so to speak, against Kentucky, but this is really a chance to get in a good rhythm and a chance to play a lot of these younger linemen and probably kind of test out some of these different alignments. Like, obviously you have some more known quantities on the offensive line in terms of veterans, but Michael Morris and Dylan Fairchild are both playing really well right now at left guard. So, like, be interesting to see potentially maybe both of them play at the same time on Saturday at some point. Maybe they get both those guys in at guard at the same time and give them some opportunities to run some different looks.
This is a game for this team to continue to do what they did at Kentucky or against Kentucky. That's it. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. And, the nation wants to see Georgia be dominant. They are just going to continue the process from this point on, I believe. I think that Kentucky was going even back to what you said. Auburn turned on the light. Kentucky allowed you to get your footing. Now it's just going to be adding layers to what you're going to see the rest of the season. Um, I don't think. I mean, I think they run the ball effectively this week, but again, I think it's going to be the same thing. I think it's going to be the pass game that allows the run game to kind of get going, allow them to continue to develop their identity, and I think you're just going to continue to see more of an explosive offense. Um, I think the goal is to get some rest and get some guys healthy. You'll have a bye week after this, so it's get in clean, get out clean. 3 quarters with the starters. The entire second team comes in the fourth quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. But I think we're looking for another blowout. I think it's going to continue to be another blowout. I don't know if it's going to be 55-0, because this defense has not shown the tenacity and the will to want to shut teams out the way the other teams have in 21 and 22 that we're used to. Even going back to the 2020 defense, that was pretty effective.
Right.
I'm hoping to see that, though. I do want to see that because this is the type of offensive line that this defensive line can really get off. Um, Vanderbilt does not run the ball very well. Even though they have the younger quarterbacks, they do like to sling that thing. AJ Swan was even throwing the ball well before he got injured, and then
Right.
you had Seals come in. So, but Seals, like you just mentioned, he's not that great of a quarterback. I mean, he's a good college quarterback, but he's not high level SEC quarterback. And this is the type of game where your defensive line can really get its footing. Because I want to see them to be tougher in the trenches. I want to see them have that nasty demeanor, that nasty attitude. I think right now they're just playing their role, which is not give up big plays, not give up the explosive plays, maintain their gas. But I need to see somebody nasty because when you go back and you look at like Carter was nasty. Carter wanted to embarrass you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I want to see that type of attitude from the trenches because it takes that to be that type of guy. And quite honestly, I think even when Georgia's offensive line goes up against some of these SEC defensive lines, they come in with that attitude. I'm trying to make my name against Georgia, and you get this nasty demeanor
Oh yeah.
against Georgia's offensive line. So why not take it the other way? Why not as a defensive in the trenches get your name off? Yeah, you're amongst 32. 11 other guys on the defense that collectively is one of the better units in the country, but still get your name off. Allow teams to feel your presence, and hopefully this front four can do that. With the combination of bringing guys off the bench as well. But yeah, I look for a lot of explosion this week.
Yeah, I think, what I said to somebody on Sunday about Georgia's defensive line is like that first group right now. It feels like they're good enough at not allowing offenses to take space from them, but they ain't taking space from anybody else either. Like they're just kind of there. They don't get pancaked. They don't get like thrown out of the club, but they're not creating havoc. The starting
Right.
defensive line had 0 pressures against Kentucky.
Exactly.
Devin Leary had an eternity to throw for the entire first quarter and most of the second quarter, and they finally brought that corner blitz with Lassiter coupled with Dumas Johnson coming up the middle because I think they were just so sick of watching him stand back there. They got to find 4 that will get pressure on their own. And if they can't, then somewhere down the road, there is going to be somebody that carves them up. And it won't be because the secondary is bad. It'll be because they've got to cover for 6 seconds every play. So that's what I'm with you. And I don't know that doing that against Vanderbilt is necessarily like a strong enough data point to say that they've fixed that problem, but it would be a step in the right direction for sure.
It's live. It's live rounds, man. I
Yeah.
mean, you got to do it at some point, and you just can't turn it on. I just came back from football practice. I butt dialed you guys, but I just came back from football practice with my son, and I'm explaining his team to each of them. You just can't turn it on Sundays or Saturdays or whenever you play.
Right.
It's got to be on all the time. The greats have it on all the time. They don't care who they embarrass. They don't care. They don't care. How you feel. It's all the time, and the greats have that. when you look at a Jalen Carter and people are just like, man, that dude is, yeah, he's a special kind of freak. He's a special kind of talent.
Yeah,
But
ain't
he
got
also,
one of those right now.
right, you don't have one of those. But I guarantee you can get somewhere, not close, but you can get, you can be within arm's distance
Yeah.
of the guy if you're doing what you got to do and it's turned on all the time. And I just don't see that about this front four yet. And I'm looking for, we mentioned Christian Miller. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting here saying he needs reps.
Yeah.
Mix him
Him,
in there.
Jordan Hall,
They need reps.
Jonathan Jefferson as well.
Yes.
He's flashed on a few occasions. Like, let's see.
But the scary thing is for where they
Let's see what
flashed,
they look like.
where have they not? And Kirby's the type of guy. Kirby's not just going to sit a guy on the bench and not play the kid just because of one guy's a senior, another guy. No,
Right.
Kirby's going to play the guy he can trust. So if you're not giving up the explosive plays, that's why you're in there. So obviously at some point they must be giving up some explosive plays in practice, some leverage
Absolutely.
things that are happening. But I need this front four to become nasty with a nasty demeanor, and really, and take your frustration, take everything that we're saying about you out on Vanderbilt. Then take the week off, and then go do the same to Florida because you can't turn it on just whenever you want to turn it on. But what's your score prediction of this game, man? Before we get ready to get up out of here.
Oh, I think Georgia. They come out and I think you see the real offense for a half and maybe a drive, maybe two in the third quarter. But I think they're going to score a lot of points in this game. I think they could score damn near as many as they want to within reason. But I'll say that Georgia goes. Let's see. I'll go 52-6.
Dude, are you like really over my shoulder?
Is that what you got?
My score was 52-7.
52-7. All right.
52-7. They haven't given up a touchdown since 2018, but again,
Yeah.
I cannot trust this team yet.
Well, especially the
just-
backups, man.
Yeah.
It seems like some of the backup defenders are, they're still learning the scheme, and there's been some positional responsibility misses in terms of assignments and stuff. But yeah, like I think that Georgia, I'll just give this away because I talked about it on Dawg Central. Go subscribe to Dawg Central, please, if you're listening
Please
to this.
do.
But
Dog Central, folks. DogCentral.com.
yeah, there's multiple sources I've talked to within the last week who are like, there's going to be some young guns that are playing a lot more on the defense after this bye week. And so, I get that they're going to probably use the bye week to get some of these guys up to speed and ready and all that. But I would guess that you would see some sort of indicator of who some of these players might be on Saturday, right? Like that you would get at least a look at them or a glance. So we'll find out, right? But
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance that we get to check them out. So, I'll be looking at the young guys across the board to see sort of, who looks like they've got a little more substance and consistency to them.
Yeah, it's funny because you said some of these young guys coming in and they maybe don't have that little extra gear to them. Well, what's wild is that the starters were those young guys in 2020,
Right.
2022. And so now we see, was there a drop off? I didn't see it when, those guys were the young guys, but maybe it's a leadership thing because
Maybe.
some of those older guys held those guys accountable. Like, look, man, we shut people out. We embarrass teams. We want you to do the same. And they took it to heart. So maybe you just need some type of switch turned on in terms of who the leader is in the clubhouse because we need to see that. But
You're either a leader or you're not, right? I mean,
Yeah, either an
that's,
alpha dog or you're not.
that's the mantra. Like,
Yeah. Hey,
yeah.
before we get out of here, I know you've been on it big time. So this is the only game we're going to talk about. Oregon, Washington. What are your quick thoughts, man? Because you've been high on Washington the entire season.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good one, man. That's going to be a
I'm
dang.
excited for it.
Yeah.
First game, I heard an incredible stat this week. This is the first Pac-12 game between two teams that are 5-0 or better since 2004.
Wow,
Yeah, yeah.
that's crazy.
The SEC has had, I think, 14 such games in that time, so it's pretty wild. But I've been on Washington all summer. In August, I picked them to make the playoff. They've made me look good so far. I do like, I like Dan Lanning. I've come around on Bo Nix in terms of his decision making. I think Oregon's offensive line is very, very good. The thing that scares me a little bit for Washington is I think Oregon has the edge in the trenches of this game. I think Washington has the edges on the outsides. A lot of my football philosophy from a predictive standpoint has been like the football's still played from the inside out, right? Like the game is still about blocking people and taking people's space. I think Washington's receivers, they got 3 NFL receivers is what they have, and I think that might be enough to swing this in their favor. But I feel like this game is going to end 38-35 or 42-38, and I really don't know who is going to win it, but I feel like we're in for a 4-point, 3-point game. I think it's going to be really good. I'm going to pick Washington because I've been on Washington all year, but truthfully, there's something in my gut that feels like Oregon's probably going to win this football game.
Bro, it's only a 3-point spread, and you get 3 for being at home. So, I mean, really, it's a pick that's on a neutral site. So,
exactly,
that's how good this game is going to be. Georgia obviously plays at 12 o'clock. Head on over, watch that game on ABC, man. That's going to be a good one.
Who you got?
You know what? I got Dan Lanning, and I got Oregon. Just because
I like it.
Just hearing him speak to his team, he sounds like a more rah-rahed up version of Kirby.
He does. Dude.
He learned a lot. He's got a little bit more pizzazz to him. He's more comfortable in terms of expressing himself in front of the camera with the media than Kirby would be. He's a little bit less reserved than what Kirby would be, but he has quickly turned around Oregon and developed a culture that's similar to Athens.
Yeah.
If that can ever happen, it would be Georgia versus Oregon every year. I mean, you talk about NIL, right? I mean, where else would you rather go than Oregon with all of their resources, with Nike and everything else, the Nike money. But they've been waiting for the guy for a long time. And who knows if Dan Lanning would ever want to leave Oregon and go back to the SEC or go anywhere else. But if they can keep that guy in house, lights out, man. It's going to be something else moving forward with Oregon. But yeah, I got Oregon pulling it out. I'm probably going to go, like you mentioned, somewhere around 42-38. It's going to be a 3-point game, 3 to 4 points in between. But I'm going Oregon. Even on the road, I'm going Oregon. So, but that's it, man. That's it for the night. We appreciate you listening as always. Make sure you, again, go over to dawgcentral.com. Great information that's always constantly going out. Remember to follow us on YouTube, TikTok, IG, the X, everything else. But as always, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Thank you for listening to the 100 Sanford Podcast. Tune in weekly to hear fresh content from the 100 Sanford Podcast every Thursday. but also with some pop-up shows every now and then as news breaks. You can also follow the content on our website, www.100sanfordpodcast.com, and email us at dogs@100sanfordpodcast.com. Lastly, reach out to us on social media streams. For Twitter, it's @100sanford, but on IG, TikTok, Facebook, and other accounts, it's 100 Sanford Podcast. All right, folks, that's it. And as usual, see you at 100 Sanford.